So for today, we will be discussing about the Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, motivation, emotional intelligence, and reasoning. So what is intelligence? I think you guys already have an idea of what it means, and probably the fittest or close to your definition is this. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, intelligence is the ability to learn, or to understand or to deal with new or trying situations. Another is that it is the ability to apply knowledge to manipulate one's environment or to think abstractly as measured by objective criteria such as tests. But did you know that intelligence is actually a quite complicated topic and its definition and the way of measuring it has been debated for decades? Let's take a look at the overview of the history of intelligence to give you an idea. In the 1800s, an Englishman named Sir Francis Galton became one of the earliest individuals who managed to study intelligence. For the reason he was interested about the concept of a gifted person. He built a laboratory in order to measure reaction time to test his hypothesis that intelligence is a general mental ability that is produced of biological evolution. His hypothesis actually related to his cousin's theory, which is Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, the proponent of theory of evolution, believes that living organisms evolve by means of inheriting both the physical and behavioral characteristic. This actually gives a hint of how genetics work, although Charles did not know the genetics at that time. Anyway, back to Sir Francis Galton's study. Galton theorized that because quickness and other physical attributes were evolutionary advantages, they would also provide a good indication of general mental ability. Thus, Galton operationalized intelligence as reaction time. Operationalization is an important process in research that involves defining an unmeasurable phenomenon such as intelligence in measurable terms such as reaction time, allowing the concept to be studied empirically. In this case, Galton could not measure intelligence and so he associated it with reaction time of the noblemen who were the subject of his study. His study about the theorization that intelligence is a heritable trait served as groundwork for future researchers as well as the debatable topic. However, many theorists argued that intelligence is not necessarily a single and generalized characteristic but is comprised of different specific traits. So here are some of the examples of theories of intelligence. The first one is Spearman's General Intelligence by Charles Spearman of the year of 1863 to 1945. The second one is Primary Mental Abilities by psychologist Louis L. Thurston of the year of 1887 to 1955. The third is Theory of Multiple Intelligence by Howard Gardner, and the fourth is Triakic Theory of Intelligence by Robert Sternberg. All of which have a common denominator. Intelligence is comprised of different abilities. Now we're gonna specifically focus our attention to Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. In Howard Gardner's theory, he asserts that every person possesses a certain specific intelligence where they is most probably good or skilled at. Here are the specific intelligences posed by Gardner on the year of 1893. The first one is verbal linguistic intelligence. It is characterized by the ability to think in words and use language to express meaning. Usually, people with this kind of intelligence have an occupation as authors, journalists, speakers, or posts. Another is the logical mathematical intelligence. It refers to the ability to carry out mathematical operations, the ability to handle long chains of reasoning, and the sensitivity and capacity to discern logical or numerical patterns. Most people with these skills become scientists, engineers, accountants, or mathematicians. Third is the spatial visual intelligence. It implies the ability to think in images, pictures, or three-dimensional figures, as well as the capacity to perceive the visual spatial world accurately and perform transmission on one's initial perception. People with these skills often work as architects, artists, sailors, or navigators, or sculptors. The fourth is the bodily kinesthetic intelligence. It is the ability to physically adept at manipulating objects, controlling one's bodily movement, and handling objects skillfully. Most people with this type of intelligence include surgeons, craftspeople, artisans, dancers, or athletes. The fifth is the musical rhythmic intelligence. It refers to the sensitivity to pitch, melody, rhythm, and tune, the ability to produce and appreciate rhythm, pitch, and timbre, and the appreciation of the forms of physical expressiveness. People with musical intelligence usually end up as composer, musician, or sensitive listener. The sixth is the interpersonal intelligence. It refers to the ability to understand and interact effectively with others, as well as the capacity to discern and respond appropriately to the moods, temperaments, motivation, and desires of others. People with this type of intelligence often work as teachers or mental health professionals. The seventh is the interpersonal intelligence. It is characterized by the ability to understand oneself, the knowledge of one's own strengths, weaknesses, desires, and intelligences, as well as the understanding of one's own feeling and the ability to discriminate among them to guide behavior. People with this intelligence eventually became theologians, psychologists, or people with detailed and accurate self-concept. Lastly, naturalist intelligence. It is described as the ability to observe patterns in nature and understand natural and human-made systems, sensitivity to the differences among diverse species, and the ability to interact subtly with living creatures. Most often, people with naturalist intelligence work as farmers, botanists, ecologists, landscapers, or environmentalists. So before we proceed to our next discussion, we will be having an activity which is try to reflect and identify the types of intelligence that you possess. Write on a piece of paper, then make a brief explanation on why you think you possess the chosen intelligence. Now, we are going to talk about what contributes to our intelligence. Contributors of intelligence. There are actually two factors which contributes to our intelligence, which is heredity and environment. Heredity refers to the genes of a person inherits from their parents. In a study about genetic and environmental influences on human psychological differences reveals that there is strong evidence suggesting that psychological differences, when reliably measured, are moderately to substantially heritable. The next one is the environment. The environment includes the experiences and the psychological and physical exposure of the person to different variables influencing around people. Examples such as your school and community are defined as a person environment. Both of these factors are equally important in making up a person's intelligence and personality. So, let's move on our next topic, which is the motivation. So, what is motivation? I know everyone has enough knowledge of what motivation means. Many say it is a human trait that some have and others do not. In practice, inexperienced managers often label people who lack motivation as lazy, but it isn't true. What we know is that motivation is a result of the interaction of the individual and the situation. Individuals differ in their motivational drive. For example, is studying because you want to get a good grades. You have to show your motivation in studying in order to have a good grades. You have to strive for excellence so that you will achieve your dreams or goals in life. Meaning of motivation is, according to dictionary definition from Oxford Languages, motivation is the general desire or willingness of some to do something. For example, reading a book to gain more knowledge. It involves the biological, emotional, and social and cognitive forces that active behavior. Psychologists approach the concept of the motivation by putting forward theories that seek to explain the levels of motivation of individuals. Some which are as follow. The first one is evolutionary theory, the second is drive reduction theory, the third is optimum arousal theory, and the last one is cognitive approach. First is evolutionary theory. Is that genetic mutations are capable of altering an organism's behavioral traits as well as its physical traits. In this way, individuals are motivated to engage in behaviors that maximize their genetic fitness. According to this theory, the motivation for sex, achievement, aggression, and other behaviors is rooted in the organism's evolutionary past. The next one is drive reduction theory. Drive reduction theory developed by Clark Hall in 1943, is a major theory of motivation in the behaviorist learning theory tradition. Drive is defined as motivation that arises due to psychological need. It works as an internal stimulus that motivates an individual to state the drive. People are motivated to take certain actions in order to reduce the internal tension that is caused by unmet needs. For example of this is if one feels hungry, hunger is the motivation for him or her to look for food, and it encourages the drive and satisfy the need. Theory works well for simple matters. You to get hungry, you seek food. The next one is optimum arousal theory. States that we seek to attain optimum arousal theory because by achieving the optimum arousal level, we can perform at our best when we are comfortable physically, emotionally, and intellectually. It means that we have reached the optimum arousal level. The Yerkes-Dodson law states that performance is at its highest under condition of moderate arousal rather than high or low arousal. With a high arousal, one might not be able to concentrate to perform the task. For example, when taking an exam with a very high arousal, a student may not be able to concentrate. On the other hand, if the arousal is too low, he or she may not work fast enough to finish the test. At times, the level of arousal also depends on the kind of task on hand. For example of this is solving mathematics problem. A lower level of arousal is preferred because of one speed more time to solve it even if the process takes longer. Then, sensation seeking is the motivation to experience varied, novel, complex, and intense feeling and experience. The characteristic of high sensation seeker or more than low sensation seeker as found by Zuckerman et al. 1972. It includes the following, which is motivated to engage in sports like mountain climbing, parachuting, hang gliding, scuba diving, car, motorcycling, racing, and downhill skiing. The next one is attracted to vacations or occupations involving exciting experiences like firefighting, emergency room work, or air traffic control. Desk job are dissatisfying to them. The third is drink heavily, smoke, use illicit drugs, and the fourth is have a short-term hedonistic attitude toward intimate relationship. And the last one is cognitive approach. Cognitive approach has to motivate focus on how a person's motivation is influenced by their cognition or mental process. It assumes that behavior is directed as a result of the active processing and interpretation of information. For example of this, the student's motivation to do well in class. One's confidence in his or her ability to do well and the expectation for success may help the person to relax, concentrate, and study better. The two aspects of cognitive approach to motivation are the first is the intrinsic and the second one is extrinsic motivation. So let's discuss what is intrinsic, which refers to doing something because it is inherently interesting or enjoyable. Example of this is reading a book because you enjoy reading and have interest in the story. The second was is extrinsic motivation, which refers to doing something because it leads to a favorable outcome. Example of this, you may enjoy spending your day doing something other than work, but you're motivated to go to work because you need a paycheck to pay your bills.
The next part would be emotional intelligence. So in emotional intelligence, it is the ability to control and manage emotions to facilitate thinking or logical reasoning. Emotional quotient or EQ is the emotional counterpart of intelligence quotient or IQ. Since EQ measures our ability to recognize emotions, whereas the IQ is the ability to solve problems and assess human intelligence. According to Bradbury in 2014, emotional intelligence are composed of 4 core skills under 2 primary competencies. It is the personal competence and social competence. When we say personal competence, It is the ability to be aware of your emotions, behavior, and tendencies. There are two core skills under personal competence. It is the self-awareness and self-management. So self-awareness is an ability to understand and perceive your own emotion. Next is self-management. An ability to use awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and positively direct your behavior. And the second competence is social competence, an ability to understand other people's mood and behavior. It also has two core skills under this social competence. So first, social awareness. It focuses on recognizing and understanding others' feelings. Lastly, is the relationship management. It's an ability to use your own emotions and others' emotion to create or manage interactions. In addition to that, emotional intelligence can be predicted based on how intellectual you are, since some are naturally more emotionally intelligent compared to others. Also, it can be used in our daily life as it practices our critical skills, control and manages emotion for ourselves and others that gives impact in our everyday decision and actions in life. So, that is all for the emotional intelligence and will be followed by reasoning. So for the last part, it would be the reasoning. Reasoning is a mental process that involves using and applying knowledge to solve problems, make plans, or make decisions in order to achieve one's goals. Reasoning is a cognitive or intellectual skill that can be used to determine whether a choice is the best among several options. There are two types of reasoning. It is the deductive and the inductive. So first is deductive reasoning. It is the act of backing up a generalized statement with specific scenarios. It is the process of arriving at conclusion based on premises that are widely accepted to be correct. This act, also known as deductive reasoning, employs a logical premise to reach a logical conclusion. Top-down reasoning is a term used to describe deductive reasoning. If something is assumed to be true and something else is related to the first assumption, the original truth must be true. An example of deductive reasoning is, all men are mortal. Harold is a man. Therefore, Harold is mortal. For deductive reasoning to be sound, the hypothesis must be correct. It is assumed that the premises, all men are mortal and Harold is a man, are true. Therefore, the conclusion is logical and true. In deductive reasoning, if something is true of a class of things in general, it is also true for all members of that class. Second is the inductive reasoning. It is the act of making generalized conclusions based off of the specific scenarios. Rather than making specific assumption based on generalized scenario, you would acquire generalized knowledge from specific scenarios to reach a conclusion in this procedure. So when we say biased reasoning, it refers to the act of jumping to conclusions before even knowing the facts. It is according to Levy. Because of their personal beliefs, a person's life of reasoning is flawed, while confirmation bias is the tendency to look for information that supports one's decision and beliefs while ignoring disconfirming information. So when someone uses biased reasoning, they are more likely to seek for information that supports their claim, which is known as confirmation bias. That would be all for the reasoning.